Audience, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. I am your host, Ms. Bazam. With me, our own Riaz Haq and Sabat Ashraf. Ladies and gentlemen, this week was very eventful week. We saw the world has witnessed a brutal attack on the mosque in New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand. But after that, the way the people in New Zealand, they responded to that type of gruesome attack, the way their leadership, especially the Prime Minister of New Zealand, she responded to that. Once again opened this new debate that these things can be condemned without mincing words, and we can easily go against such kind of gruesome acts if we stop putting ifs and buts. No matter those people, the terrorists, belong to our race, our religion, our nationality. So let us start talking about this issue. There is an editorial in New York Times which says that United States want a leadership like the Prime Minister of New Zealand. The way I see it, ladies and gentlemen, is that Prime Minister of New Zealand came from the same society, from the society which is created in New Zealand. And the way the whole society responded to it shows that in US, if we want that type of leadership, we want to have a society like that. Unfortunately, here we see there is a tolerance towards such kind of groups and such kind of people. And it's polarized society where we all live in. It's so as in Pakistan and India. We live in very polarized societies. So let me go to my panelists and let us open the discussion. So Riaz, when this all happened, my first understanding, I should not say expectation, but my understanding would be that, yeah, they say, yes, it happened, it's very bad, okay, fine, but the thing is that, well, Muslims also kill people, white people in France, and this and that, and, there would not be too much of a reaction. How you see that? What did you think when it started first time?
So I think since this incident took place last Friday, where the 50 people tragically were killed in a mosque. 50 Muslims were killed while praying peacefully in a mosque on Friday. Since then, we have seen the best of humanity, and we've also seen the worst of humanity. So it's very interesting. For example, the way the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, has responded to it is amazing. I mean, she has shown such compassion and such decisiveness in the face of this tragedy. She has won the hearts of not only Muslims, but many other people around the world. She's also been very decisive in the sense that after the tragedy occurred, she immediately announced that she was going to look at the gun laws again. And then within a week of that, she actually banned all of the assault weapons, the kind of weapons that were used in this particular tragedy. At the same time, we have also seen a celebration of this gruesome tragedy in social media, particularly by Hindu nationalist groups and the white nationalist groups. There were times when, some of the tweets that I saw were really shocking. One of the tweets came from an Indian Hindu nationalist, which said that 50 runs in one ball. Great, congratulations. Another similar tweet said that 50 future terrorists killed in New Zealand. There was one instance where In fact, a person living in United Arab Emirates was celebrating on social media the killing of innocent Muslims. And the employer found out about it, and they fired that person and deported them from Dubai. So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that also has been happening. But overall, I think the response of the community here in the United States, particularly the non-Muslim community, has been tremendous. You know, I was a little apprehensive going to the Friday prayer after
today,
this had occurred.
Yes.
Last Friday,
okay.
Not today. This was previous Friday.
It was the week before that.
Yeah. And my daughter, you know, actually called me and said, "Daddy, be careful. Don't go if you don't. You know, I'd rather have you not go." I said, "No, I'm going to go. I think it's going to be okay." And when I arrived at the mosque, there was a Jewish rabbi and a Christian pastor at the door. They shook my hand and they offered condolences, and we sat together in the mosque. There were also, I heard other places in the United States where the people formed human chains to try and protect.
Yeah, even today I saw some ladies from the church, and they were having a placard, and placards were saying that you go pray, we are here to protect you. It was very nice.
Oh, extremely nice. I think we in Pakistan can learn a lot from this. I think there's a lot of adulation in Pakistan for the way Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has handled this, and I hope that we can begin to emulate something like this.
And stop putting ifs and buts and reasons,
We need to be very clear that this kind of behavior is unacceptable, and we need to protect our minorities in the same way. She has set such a great example for the world of how to handle these tragedies. And hopefully the Pakistanis will learn from it, other Muslim nations will learn from it, and the Americans will learn from it as well.
Yes. So, Sabat, Jacinda Ardern, you know, her actions, do you see it as some sort of movement of peace started in the world? Are you seeing it? You can comment on my first question also, but please look into that way also.
Before I get into that, I do want to touch a couple of notes of just emotional interest for us. The odd thing is, and this didn't get mentioned as much as it should have, or at least in our circles, Christchurch is not some small town of, because you think about New Zealand, most of us don't think about New Zealand much. But if you are a South Asian, Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi, because of cricket, Christchurch is one of the major venues
from the young age
of test cricket in the world. So in fact, I have Indian friends for whom this was a much bigger thing because it was Christchurch. Non-Muslim friends. Because it was Christchurch, and most people, it was in the news a little bit in the beginning, but the Bangladeshi cricket team was on the way to one of those mosques at that moment. A few minutes here and there, and this would have been, I mean, you can't think of a bigger incident than what happened in Christchurch, but this would have been an international incident of further dimensions. That is one thing. And so the other thing about the Prime Minister, Ms. Ardern, the interesting thing is, by background, she is not exactly, she's not looked at as a very progressive person, but she is a community leader. And there are moments in life where one thinks, sometimes you watch TV shows where they are showing a very idealized person, like President Bartlett of the West Wing, where the TV character, because they are scripted, they do all the right things exactly as they should be.
And really, it was looking to be like a...
Exactly. Often we sit down, and even in the US, for example, we get, even when people are trying to do the right thing, they get out there, they say thoughts and prayers and this and that, but they never quite hit that idealistic, ideal form. And in this case, not just the Prime Minister, but the whole nation of New Zealand, just completely, as Riyasa said, they presented an ideal of how a sad incident like this should be handled. And they went from soup to nuts, right? They went from turning up the day of being very respectful, working with people, then turning around and looking at what laws needed to be changed, getting it done within a week. People ask, how long would it take to do it in the US? The problem is not that the process is wrong, as the New Zealanders have shown. It's the political will to do it, right? Things are complicated. On the other side, if I may urge a word of caution, and this kind of addresses your other question of, does this give us more peace?
Or at least start.
Does this start anything? In one way, what one can hope is, by doing what she did and bringing people like, excuse me for saying so, Imran Khan and others, on the record as supporting or agreeing that this is the right way to handle this kind of situation, I think it becomes a teachable moment. It will enter people's consciousness as a real option. Mm-hmm. And the questions have already started, for example, in Pakistan, where we have incidents against minorities. I mean, Shia doctors have been killed. And Ahmadis, Qadianis, whatever you want to call them. Ahmadi Muslims have...
Christian churches have been attacked.
Christian churches have been attacked very much in the same way as this incident has happened, right? So that question now becomes real, and one can hope and pray that the people will now expect better from their leaders. In Pakistan, in the US, and so on. On the other hand, and you notice I left out a name there, in India, this is also both the reaction to Pulwama and this incident has actually, and this might be wishful thinking on my part, but I think it's really happening, it has brought some of India's moderate middle-class people into sitting up and thinking about some reality, getting a reality check. Like what happened with the Kashmiris in the rest of India after Pulwama. The fact that Modi did not really give a proper statement on the Christchurch attack.
Yes.
These things, and Congress, for all its faults, and we have never been, at least I've never been a fan of how Congress behaved on the issue of Indian Muslims, but they would have, a Congress government would have offered at least platitudes. He didn't even offer platitudes. So, and that I think will at least bring some, it will make the people expect better from their governments. That I think is where the hope is. I'm not one of those that believes, this is the first in a lot of many good things to happen.
No, I agree.
I am not.
I agree. My point was that it may be a starting point. It could be a starting point.
Let us hope so.
Yes. So Riaz, let me move a little bit more into. Let me dive into this whole thing. You remember Dr. Jared Taylor? You and Ali Hassan Samant were interviewed, and ladies and gentlemen, you can watch his interview on our website, talkforpark.com, where Riaz Haq and Ali Hassan Samant were interviewed him. So he is a white supremacist, a very nice gentleman. I mean, I have nothing against the way he came up, the way he talked to us, very respectful and all that. But once the things he's saying, and pretty much you guys were challenging him, but his last point was, in the end, his point was that, okay, who cares? You guys just get out and we will worry about it. We will be old people, we will die, but we don't need you. How you see this whole thing is coming up now? I mean, this, like in the beginning of the show, I made this comment that in US, it's a polarized society. At one hand, you see people like the Jewish rabbi and the church people. And the other hand, there are people who just say that, well, it's okay. I mean, everything is allowed. How do you see that?
So I think extremists exist in every society. And, Jared Taylor is just one example of it in the United States. What is more worrisome is what kind of a leadership we have and what tone does that leadership set. In New Zealand, for example, Jacinda Ardern set a terrific example, set a very good tone. In fact, when she said, these immigrants are part of our society. In fact, he said, they are us.
Yes.
The rhetoric we hear in the United States from Trump and his supporters, and also in India, they see immigrants, Muslims, people who are different from them as invaders. They see them as somebody who's trying to take away what they have. And they attack them as criminals. I mean, the language is so terrible, the way they describe it. This dehumanization of people. This is the kind of thing we've seen. Now, even in this, after this incident, for example, both Trump and Modi made statements.
Yes.
And they condemned it. But they didn't say a single word about the Muslim victims, did not express any sympathy. In fact, the word Muslim was completely missing from their vocabulary.
And the T word?
Yeah.
T word was missing too.
Yeah. So this is the kind of talk that we hear from these people. Now, there is a reason for it. There's a lot of harmony in terms of the language, the rhetoric, the thinking of both the white nationalists and the Hindu nationalists. And it goes back a long way. In fact, when RSS, the organization that produced Modi, and the organization that is considered the mother of the Sangh Parivar in India, of which Modi is a member, that organization was created along the lines of the fascist movement in Italy. There was a guy by the name of BS Moonje who went from India to visit Italy. He actually met Mussolini, and he saw how the fascist organization was operating. And he brought that model back to India. And then he worked with people like Savarkar and Golwalkar and other people. And here's the kind of language that you hear from people like Golwalkar. In his book, for example, he actually admires Hitler and the final solution that Hitler, this is we're talking about back in the 1930s. So Golwalkar wrote as follows. He said that to keep up the purity of the race and its culture, Germany shocked the world by purging the country of the Semitic races, the Jews. Race pride at its highest has been manifested here. Germany has also shown how well nigh impossible it is for races and cultures having differences going to the root to be assimilated into one united whole. A good reason for us, lesson for us in Hindustan to learn and profit by. So this is the kind of ideology that has produced Modi. Now, the other thing, since the social media have become so common and a lot of people have access to it, we're seeing a lot of, at least, communication and collaboration between the Hindu nationalist movement and the white nationalist movement. Now, do you remember Breivik, Anders Breivik, the guy in Norway who killed a lot of people, a terrorist attack? And he actually left a manifesto before he did this. That carried out the terrorist attack that killed, I think it was like 50 people that were killed, more than 50 people were killed. Yeah. In the manifesto he wrote, it is essential that the European and Indian resistance movements learn from each other and cooperate as much as possible. Our goals are more or less identical. Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of commonality that exists. Social media has just made it possible. Now, if you go to the social media, if you monitor some of these accounts of the Hindu nationalists, the BJP guys, the Modi supporters, and the white nationalists, you see a lot of similarity in the kind of language they use. I mean, they're so hateful, they're so bigoted. Even in our site, you go to look at our channel on YouTube. Yeah, you see such blatant bigotry in the comment section.
You are talking about the comment section.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So this has become normal these days. And I think one other thing that has to be done, and I hope the social media companies will pay attention to it, is not to allow social media to propagate these hateful ideologies, which actually can be turned into action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sabahat, it's true that the nationalism, this type of nationalism, like a violent nationalism, I would say, where It's total intolerance. Don't you see that these Muslim extremists, they pretty much talk like that about other religions?
No, absolutely. In fact, there have been a couple of very interesting memes this week that went around. In fact, there was this incident in Pakistan where I think a student had killed a teacher because he thought he was blasphemous or something. And someone had put a picture of him and some representation of the Christchurch shooter together and said, these guys are identical. Now, this is something that people like me have been saying for years. You've heard me say this on this show for years now, that I can take any Billy Graham speech and any mullah speech, one of our, hateful mullahs, not any mullah, and pretty much only some of the words are different. It's the same thing. It's the same. So we've been saying this for a long time.
I think the difference is that they're not in power.
Well,
in the United States and in India, they are the power. They are the leaders, and the leaders set the tone for the rest of it. Every community has its bigots, but when those bigots rise to the top, that's when it becomes a serious problem.
I would beg to differ on that. In Pakistan, not only they might not be in government right now, or at least the government.
They don't win any votes either. Every election shows they get very few votes.
If I may finish that, I'm the one that always puts on the record that in Pakistan, never have we put more than 13% of votes behind these religious fanatics, and that has been our history, except for the last 1 or 2 elections. Now, you might say, and please let me finish this, you might say they're not in power right now.
They can.
But the radicalization and fanaticization of Pakistani society started with General Zia. And General Zia, and for a lot part of his rule, the Jamaat-e-Islami was a partner with him. And what they did to society, to curricula, to media, and back then there was only state-controlled media, the changes they wrought are now in the very fabric of Pakistani society.
Yeah, and you saw the incident in Bawalpur, the young boy, and this is getting...
and those are incidents. So the incidents are happening, people in... And I hate to remind everyone this on a day like this, but when the Danish cartoon thing was happening, it was Mr. Imran Khan. He was walking around with a copy of that magazine, waving it in front of television cameras. He's used that kind of rhetoric to build his political campaigns too. In fact, ever since Asad Omar and what happened over the last few years when his party got organized,
and all that.
Not Sheikh Rashid, what I'm saying is, in the last few years, his party has gotten a little more formal and organized, and they've toned down that rhetoric. One of his reflexes have always been the same.
No, but they did a strong campaign on this some kind of law which came. PTI did, and then when
absolutely blasphemy law. In fact, one of the last things they did before they came to power was this big pushback against, and it wasn't. I mean, the irony was it was one of their own members who had supported it or sponsored it, but their accusation was that the Nawaz Sharif government wants to remove some religious test from the election forms. This election which they won.
Yes.
So, I mean, to say that they're not in power or don't have a position in Pakistan is just not true. I mean, we have to face that. I mean, again, this week, especially Pulwama onwards, Pakistan and its society have acted in very nice ways, and we're very proud of it and very hopeful because we've suddenly, found religion, so to speak.
Yeah. So, Riaz, I remember, I'm talking about 1991, 92 around, when Bosnian war going on. I remember I was in Philadelphia and I was sitting in the International Student Office. So there was some magazine where they were showing the pictures of those girls who were found from the rape camps, which was created by these Chechnik nationalists.
Serbs.
So there is one Pakistani student sitting there. He was from, supporter of Jamiat and all that. I don't know personally him, but he told me. So when I was reading, he came to me and he looked at it. He said, "Why you are reading? These women deserve that. Look at it, the way they dress up. Look at it, the way they do. They deserve." So, our society has this, and this is a young people living in United States, And another incident, I went to Ohio for some interview when I was getting my PhD admission. So one of my friends kind of connected me to some of his friends. So I stay overnight in his place at Columbus, Ohio. And all night they were talking about young people, educated people, and they were talking that Quran say go and murder people, and without that we cannot make our society. I'm talking about 1992, 93. So, you know, I mean...
yeah, I think it is true that our society has its share of extremists. Every society in the world has extremists who want to go kill people who are different from them. I think the difference, and again I would say what I said earlier, the difference is what kind of a leadership do you have in the country? Does it encourage that kind of behavior? Does it stop it? That is what matters. You know, and for example in New Zealand, I'm sure there are extremists in New Zealand too.
I'm pretty sure.
But look at the way the Prime Minister behaved.
Good.
She set the tone. So I think our leaders need to set the tone. They need to say, and I hope that, as you said, that the example that the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has set, that example would be used by others as well in future tragedies. And I'm sure there will be more tragedies because there are extremists everywhere.
Of course.
Okay. They don't need any encouragement. I mean, these guys are bad people. They will do what they want to do, but they should not get any encouragement from the top leadership.
Yeah. See, this is you know, like as we go further, we have to see that how these societies evolve, and our biggest fear, which I kind of share with Sabahat here, that as we move further, do you remember when Nawaz Sharif called the Ahmadis as our brother Ahmadis? What kind of you know? Like
I'm sure you know there are people who would exploit that for their own purposes. In fact, his own son-in-law spoke against him.
That's true.
So I mean, these things exist.
Yes,
that's a fact.
Yes.
So it's not one person or one individual. There's a group of people that have that kind of thinking. But the government, the leadership must discourage that.
Yeah. See, that is very important. Sabahat, you have a last word.
I will go back to my earlier point where Rasab says, you know, the government needs to discourage, and I think there is always a feedback between the people and the government, right? So we do need to, and part of it is understanding, and I think part of the understanding that comes from leaders like this Jacinda Ardern is that they understand that they don't want to muddy their own society. Like, I mean, the role that George W. Bush, for all his warmongering, his role within the US in the days immediately following 9/11 was very similar. He went for the first time, US president went to a mosque, made statements. They weren't as drastic as Jacinda Ardern, and there was other politics, but he did go and do that. So, and that is modeling, and this is much more drastic, it's much more visible, and I hope there are other factors that are coming in. For example, especially with respect to Pakistan, there is the factor of, in the post-Pulwama world, Pakistanis are starting to realize why they need to be, enlightened self-interest, enlightened good behavior. And in the US too, one thing we haven't discussed much is that contrast is having an effect on US politics as well, on people in the US. And I'm hoping that people and, electorate will reward leaders that act the right way and take away leadership, especially in democracies and in societies, as long as people sort of encourage and provide that positive feedback to leaders. That's how these things will improve.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard my panelists how they see this whole incident. Basically, our main goal was kind of look into all over the world these movements which are kind of super ultra nationalist movement. Some of them have a religious markers on that, but actually these are all ultra nationalists, these Muslim quote unquote religious movements. They also have a basically the political goals, bringing back the glory of Islam, and what is the glory of Islam when there was a caliphs ruling over, these kind of things, which of course now we live in the era where there is a nation and state concept. That time there was no nation and state concept and all. So we would be talking about these issues, but for this week, this was all our show. Thank you very much, Riaz. Thank you very much, Sabahat. So this is your host, Misbah Azam. You are watching Viewpoint from Overseas.